This is my pre-algebra course. Today you're going to learn negative numbers. We're going to first learn how to add and subtract negative numbers. And I want you to understand that the operations, the calculations themselves are not going to be difficult. But when it comes to reading and writing these operations, that is specifically connecting numbers with positive and negative signs, that's going to be the most difficult thing in this course. I know it doesn't seem like that would be difficult, but the grammar and the syntax when it comes to connecting numbers with positives and negative signs is not going to be easy. But the good news is once you learn how to read it and write it, it's just going to be second nature to you. So let's get started. Number 1, 3 minus 5. Now I bet you can figure out what the answer is without me teaching you anything about negative numbers. So think about that for a second and ask yourself what the answer would be. If you said -2, you're correct. When you're adding and subtracting negative or positive numbers, you have to ask which number defeats. Is it the positive number that defeats or the negative number that defeats? So in problem number 1, 5 was the negative number. So we know our answer has to be negative because 5 is bigger than 3. And 5 was 2 bigger than 3. So that's why we put the 2. Now see if you can do number 2. -4 plus 7. What would the answer to that problem be? Well, if you said +3, you're correct. And by the way, we need to rectangle these as usual. So the positive number is bigger. It defeats the negative number. So the positive number is 7, and it's 3 bigger. So we know our answer must be positive because the positive number is bigger, and we know it must be 3 because 7 is 3 bigger than 4. 7 defeats 4 by 3, and 5 in this upper problem defeats 3 by 2. All right, and make sure you're writing your equal signs here. Now, we don't have to put a positive sign on the 3. You can put one, but it's just not necessary. All right, on to number 3, 5 plus -7. Now, it's important to understand that you can never write a positive and negative next to each other, like so, without writing parentheses. Now, why is that? I don't know. That's just the way that the math language is. So in this course, you're going to be learning primarily algebra, and that's just the way the algebraic language works. So 5 plus -7. Figure out which one defeats, the negative or the positive, and then figure out by how much it defeats, and you should be able to find the answer. So try number 3, and when you're done, we'll do it together. All right, so 5 plus -7 is -2. The negative number is bigger, which means our answer must be negative. And it defeats 5 by 2 because 7 is 2 bigger than 5. All right, number 4, -3 plus 5. See if you can do that one. If you said 2, you're correct. Figure out which number defeats. Is it the negative that defeats or the positive? In this problem, the positive defeats because 5 is bigger than 3, so we know our answer must be positive. And how much does 5 defeat? Or how much bigger is 5? Well, it's 2 bigger, so our answer must be 2. We have a lot of 2's for our answers here. That's just a coincidence. All right, so for number 5, we're adding -6 and -10. So if you add those two together, what do you think you'll get? Well, if you said -16, you're correct. If you add two negative numbers, it's just going to make a bigger negative number, or technically actually a smaller number, because the bigger the negative number is, the smaller the number is. All right, so, and again, the reason we have parentheses here is because in math notation, you're not allowed to put a positive and a negative right next to each other without some sort of parentheses. All right, number 6, -6 minus 10. This is where things start to get really confusing for students. 6 minus 10 is intuitive, but negative 6 minus 10, students really become nervous about something like that. It's important to understand that negative 6 minus 10 is, this problem is the same as this problem. It's just different notation, different ways of writing it. So negative 6 minus 10 is just negative 16. Negative 6 minus 10 is the same thing as negative 6 plus negative 10. That really makes students nervous. That really worries students. But the reason that we write it this way is because we don't want to write the parentheses and we don't want to write the plus. It's just easier to write it this way. So it's a condensed form of addition. But because it looks like you're subtracting numbers, it really makes students nervous. Adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive, and it doesn't matter how many times I tell you that. It's for many students it just doesn't compute. But you have to understand that this is not something that you have to spend a lot of time trying to understand the concept of it. All you need to know is that this is math notation. This is telling you how to add negative numbers. And this is how you read and write the notation telling you how to add or subtract negative numbers. So don't overthink this. Just learn the language, and you'll be on to the next class. Negative 8 minus 5, again, that's just negative 8 plus negative 5. So that would be negative 13. All right. So now we're going to do what's called double negatives. This is called a double negative because you have two negatives right next to each other. And whenever you have that, you have to write parentheses, as you see here. 9 minus negative 4, when you have a double negative, the two negatives become a positive. And so it just becomes 9 plus 4, which is 13. Now that's not intuitive. Negative 8 minus negative 3, the negative stays on the 8, but because there are two negatives next to each other, they become positives. And when you add those together, you get negative 5. So double negatives are pretty strange. Again, there are reasons for these things, but most students don't think about the reasons, and most students don't really even want to know the reasons. It doesn't matter if you're a college student, high school student. Most students just learn the operations, they learn the language, and they use it wherever they need it. So now let's do those problems again. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Negative 11 plus 7 is, think about that, what would that be? If you said negative 4, you're correct. 8 plus negative 3, what would that be? If you said 5, you're correct. Negative 14 plus 9. If you said negative 5, you're correct. Negative 9 plus negative 12. If you said negative 21, you're correct. And negative 9 minus 12, that's the same thing as negative 9 plus negative 12. It's negative 21. All right? And so negative 4 minus 3, again, that's the tricky one. That's the one that students always hate. Negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7. So now we do the double negatives. Because you have two negatives next to each other, they become a positive. So it becomes 8 plus 5, which is 13. Now in this problem, the negative remains, but the two double negatives, they become positive. The negative on the 1 remains, that is. And negative 1 plus 3 is 2. All right, so now it's your turn. Try number 19. Actually, try numbers 19 through 27. And when you come back, we'll do those together. All right, we're back. That should be -6. And we should have 3 and 1, 8, -11, -11, -13, and 7 plus 2 would be 9. That's a double negative. And -3 plus 2 would be -1. So if you did those correctly, good job. If you didn't do them correctly, go back and figure out what you did wrong. But let's move on to the next problems here. Try 28 and 29. Actually, let me zoom out here. Try numbers 28 through 35, and when you come back, we'll do those together. All right, we're back. 9 minus 11, that would be -2. -8 plus 1 is -7. 5 plus -7 is -2. -13 plus 4 is -9. And I don't need to state all these as I go along here. So if you got those answers, good job. And we have our double negatives. 6 plus 3 is 9. -8 plus 9 is 1. Make sure you rectangle all your answers. If you don't rectangle your answers, then you're not doing it correctly. All right, so why don't you try a few more here? Go ahead and try 38 through 44. And when you come back, we'll do them together. All right, we're back. 1 minus 9 is -8. And we have 5, 5, 2, -3, -14, -14. And so if you got those answers, good job. I think we're ready to go on to 45. Now remember, I mentioned that adding and subtracting negative numbers is the most difficult part of this course. Well, what we did so far is really not that difficult, if you notice that. But what we're about to do, that's where it starts to become difficult. When you have multiple numbers that you're adding and putting together here. So remember, from the previous course, we learned PEMDAS. Whenever you have addition and subtraction, you always move left to right. If you add 11 plus 5 first, then subtract that from 8, you're going to get the wrong answer because the negative goes with the 11. So we have to do 8 minus 11 first. 8 minus 11 is -3, and I just rewrite the 5. And -3 plus 5 is 2. So the answer for that one is 2. All right. 6 plus -7 is -1. And -1 plus 4 is 3. Negative 9 plus 7 is negative 2. And negative 2 plus negative 2 is 0. So we're moving left to right. It turns out that you don't always have to move left to right in every problem, but it's just safe to do that. All right, number 48, 6 plus negative 11. The negative 11 defeats, so you end up with negative 5. And rewrite the other numbers. And negative 5 minus 4, that's the same thing as negative 5 plus negative 4, so that would be negative 9. Again, I know that's weird, but you're just going to have to get used to that notation. And the final answer is negative 2. 6 minus 3 is 3. 3 minus 8 is negative 5. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. Wait a second. Yep. 9. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. And there you go. We're going to do some more of these before you try some on your own. Negative 4 plus 7 is 3. And 3 plus negative 10 is negative 7. 7 minus 8 is negative 1. Negative 1 minus 10 is the same thing as negative 1 plus negative 10. Let me rewrite that. Negative 1 minus 10 is the same thing as negative 1 plus negative 10, which is negative 11. Negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 minus 8 is the same thing as negative 6 plus negative 8, so it would be negative 14. So I know that this is new language for you. It's all new language. But that's the purpose of this course, is to learn the language of algebra. Remember, that's the most difficult thing of any course, is any math course, is to learn the language of the math notation. The calculations, you'll notice, they're not very difficult. Negative 14 minus 5 is negative 19. Negative 19 plus 3 is negative 16. And negative 16 plus negative 1 is negative 17. Whoops. And negative 17 plus 6 is negative 11. So that was kind of a long one. So the reason that adding and subtracting negative numbers is so difficult is because if you make one mistake along here, your answer is going to be incorrect, and it's sometimes very difficult to figure out where you made the mistake. That's why adding and subtracting negative numbers is the most difficult part of this course. All right, so now it's your turn. I want you to try number 55, and when you come back, we'll do it together. So pause the video. All right, we're back. 7 minus 8 is negative 1. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1. So if you got 1, good job. If you didn't get 1, that's okay. Just go back and figure out what you did wrong. All right, number 56. Go and attempt that problem, and when you're done, we'll do it together. Pause the video. All right, we're back. Negative 3 plus negative 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. If you got negative 3, good job. If you didn't get negative 3, just go back and figure out what you did wrong. All right, 57. Attempt number 57, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Negative 3 minus 9 is negative 12. And negative 12 plus 1 is negative 11. So if you got negative 11, good job. All right, go and attempt 58, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. And negative 2 plus negative 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus 4 is 1. So if you got 1, good job. And if you made a mistake along the way, that's okay. Just go back and figure out what you did wrong. All right, attempt number 59, and when you come back, we'll do it together. Pause the video. All right, we're back. Negative 8 plus 7 is negative 1. Negative 1 plus negative 10 is negative 11. And negative 11 minus 3 is the same thing as negative 11 plus negative 3, so that would be negative 14. Again, I know this language is very strange, but you're going to have to learn it. Every student has to learn this new language. Go and attempt number 60, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. 9 plus negative 1 is 8. 8 plus negative 8 is 0. So if you got 0, good job. Attempt number 61, and when you come back, we'll do it together. Pause the video. All right, we're back. Negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. Negative 10 plus negative 2 is negative 12. So if you got negative 12, good job. All right, attempt 62, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. Negative 10 minus 8 is negative 18. So if you got negative 18, good job. Attempt 63, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. 6 minus 8 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus negative 1 is negative 3. So if you got negative 3, good job. All right, try 64, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Negative 7 plus 2 is negative 5. Negative 5 plus negative 3 is negative 8. And negative 8 minus 9 is negative 17. So if you got negative 17, very good. I'm proud of you. If you didn't get the right answer, that's okay. Just figure out where you went wrong and go back and fix it. All right, try number 65, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Negative 10 plus 1 is negative 9. Negative 9 minus 7 is negative 16. And negative 16 minus 3 is negative 19. So if you got negative 19, good job. All right, so this is a problem that is probably the most difficult problem for students to do because of the strange notation. Negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. And negative 6 minus 3 is negative 9. And negative 9 minus 1 is negative 10. So the reason this problem is so difficult is because you just have a bunch of negative numbers next to each other. So you're taking the strange abbreviated notation and you're taking it to the max. So I want you to understand that this notation is exactly the same as this notation. The only difference is students have no problem understanding this notation. They have a big problem understanding this notation, let me tell you. So you get the same thing here. Negative 4 plus negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus negative 3 is negative 9. Negative 9 plus negative 1 is negative 10, so you get the same answer. So let's see here. Why don't you attempt one of those problems, and when you come back, we'll do it together. Pause the video. All right, we're back. Negative 10 minus negative 1 is negative 11. Negative 11 minus 3 is negative 14. Negative 14 minus 4 is negative 18. So if you got negative 18, good job. And the above problem is exactly the same as the problem you just did. you're just going to end up with negative 18. So the point of that is to demonstrate that those two types of notation are the same types of notation. So I could write this problem with parentheses, but why would I want to do that when I can just eliminate the parentheses and the addition signs? It's much easier to write. So go and attempt number 70, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. So negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. Negative 10 minus 3 is negative 13. Negative 13 minus 7 is negative 20. So if you got negative 20, good job. And of course, this problem, you get negative 20 also. So that's adding and subtracting negative numbers. Again, the calculations are very easy. In this course, I'm not gonna bog you down by giving you numbers like negative 563 plus negative 8,762, because why would I do that? The purpose of this class is to teach you the concepts of negative numbers, not to waste your time making you do difficult calculations. So the calculations generally get easier as you go up into upper math. And when the calculations become more difficult, you are allowed to use a calculator. So the purpose of the previous course, arithmetic, was to teach you how to do operations without a calculator. But once you go into upper math, you're not going to spend a lot of time doing those types of calculations, because it's much easier just to use a calculator. And you're probably thinking, well, then why do we learn those calculations in the first place? Why can't we just use a calculator? Well, you know the answer to that question. If all the calculators broke, we'd all be lost. All right. And of course, if you want to be an engineer and you want to design a calculator, you have to know how to do the operations yourself also. So now we go on to multiplying and dividing. So the good news is that multiplying and dividing is much, much easier than adding and subtracting, as long as you know your multiplication facts. If you don't know your multiplication facts, you're in some big trouble right now, because we're going to do things like 9 times 9 is 81, 7 times 4 is 28, 8 times 6 is 48. Notice that I am not doing those calculations. I have those numbers memorized. You must have your multiplication facts memorized. They're also called products, or they used to be called multiplication tables, whatever you want to call them. You have to have all those memorized, 36 of them. And if you want some tips on how to memorize those multiplication facts, you can go to my previous course, the course entitled Memorizing Multiplication Facts or Products, or whatever the title is, and you can learn about how to do that. But you really don't really need me to teach you. You just need to go online and find multiplication facts and just memorize those numbers. So I'm gonna assume that you took my previous class, or that you have your multiplication facts memorized. All right, so there's a couple things to notice here for number 72 and all these problems. One thing to notice is that we have parentheses. What are these parentheses doing here? Well, we're learning multiplication, so you might have guessed that these parentheses mean multiplication. But you're probably thinking, well, wait a second, why are we using parentheses for multiplication? Shouldn't we use the crosses like we did before in the previous class in arithmetic? Shouldn't we use this notation? Well, in algebra, most commonly, parentheses are used to show multiplication in this context. The crosses are not used commonly in upper math courses. They are used, but they're not used very, very much. And the reason is, when you get into algebra, x is often used for something different. For example, you might see an expression like this. Those x's don't mean multiplication. They mean something else. So you might have something like x, or you might have 2x times 3x. Well, you have a bunch of x's next to each other. It's going to get confusing. In the previous course, we also learned how to show multiplication with dots. So you could write negative 2 times 5. But what if you had something like negative 3 0.4 times 6.55. With all these dots, things would get pretty confusing. So we don't typically use dots for algebra either. In this context, we use parentheses for when we go into algebra. So again, you're going to use crosses sometimes, you're going to use dots sometimes, but mostly you're going to use parentheses when you have a type of problem like this. So we now are going to use parentheses for multiplication. So this is asking us to multiply -2 times 5. So this is very easy. You just multiply those two numbers, 2 times 5, to get 10, like you normally would. And that's it. All you have to do is figure out what the sign would be. Would it be positive or negative? And it's the same thing for this problem. 48. 6 times 8 is 48. This problem is 9 times 4 is 36. All you have to do is figure out what the signs are. So multiplication and division, they're all really easy. 7 times 4 is 28, so on and so forth. 5 times 8 is 40. We just have to figure out what the signs are going to be. And there's a rule that you're going to use for signs. So let's go ahead and write that rule. A positive times a positive is obviously a positive. That's what we did in the last class, or the last course. A negative times a negative is a positive also. But if you have different signs, a positive times a negative, that equals a negative. And if you have a negative times a positive, of course, you get the same thing, a negative. So one way to remember this is like signs, meaning they're the same sign, they give a positive. They like each other because they're like signs, so it's a positive situation. Whereas unlike signs, different signs, they give a negative. They're unlike each other, they don't like each other, so it's a negative situation. So you don't have to remember that cheesy story, but that's just one way to remember this rule. I should probably keep that up there, actually. All right, so we have unlike signs for 72. We have a negative and we have a positive. They're unlike signs. They don't like each other. It's a negative situation. We have a positive times a negative. They're unlike signs. They don't like each other. It's a negative situation. Same thing for 74. But 75, now we have like signs. They're both negative. In all the previous problems, we had unlike signs. We had negative, positive, positive, negative, negative, positive. But in this problem, we have two negatives. So they're like signs, they like each other, and it's a positive situation. So you don't have to write positive. You can just leave it as 28. That's assumed to be positive. And -5 times -8, again, that's two like signs. They're both negative, so our answer is going to be positive 40. All right, so here you have three numbers that you're multiplying. -3 times 2 is -6. -6 times, and because these are unlike signs, our answer will be negative. -6 times -9, those are like signs, so we get positive 54. 4 times -5 is -20. -20 times -6 is going to be a positive because they're like signs, and it would be 120. 6 times 2 is 12, and then just add a 0 for 120. We learned how to do that in the previous class, my arithmetic course. So, in algebra, multiplication is shown with parentheses. Division is shown with a fraction sign. Whenever you see a fraction sign in algebra, that means division. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, where in the world did that come from? Why does fraction mean division? Well, we went over that a little bit in the previous course. It's not really that important to understand why that is at this point. You just want to learn the notation, and in schools don't really explain why that is. Textbooks don't explain it. I could go into a lengthy explanation of why that is, but it's probably just going to bore you. So just know that a fraction sign means division. So that means negative 25 divided by 5. That's what this problem actually means. And by the way, the explanation for why a fraction sign means division really is not that difficult to explain. But again, it's not that important at this point. So what we have to do, the division works the same way that multiplication does. You just do the division problem. 25 divided by 5 is 5. No big deal. You just have to figure out what the sign is. And that's the same thing as saying negative 25 divided by 5 with the original notation that we used to use. 24 divided by 8 is 3. So again, it's very easy. We just have to figure out what the signs are. Same thing for this problem. 64 divided by 8 is 8. And 72 divided by 9 is 8. So you can see that this is very, very, very easy. The only thing that we have to figure out is what the signs are. Looks like I have a lot of 8s in these problem sets. So you'll be pleased to find out that the sign rule is exactly the same for multiplication. So if you have unlike signs, a negative divided by a positive, you get a negative. They're unlike signs, they don't like each other, so it's a negative situation. Same thing there. And by the way, if you divide a negative by a positive, you get a negative, but if you divide a positive by a negative, it's the same thing. No difference. So these are unlike signs. That would be negative and negative. And here you have like signs, so your answer is going to be a positive 8. Should probably move that closer. And here you have like signs again. And you have unlike signs, like signs, so positive. All right, so multiplying and dividing negative numbers, as you can see, is really easy. All right, so now we're going to go on to number 88, and I want you to try these problems. In fact, try numbers 88 through 97, and when you come back, we'll do them together. All right, we're back. So you should have gotten negative 35, negative 54, negative 8, and I don't have to say all these. On this problem, I should have given you some more room here. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 times negative 1 is 6. So if you got 6 for that problem, good job. And let me give you some space here for this one. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 5 is positive 60. That was kind of a challenge problem. And that would be negative 9 and negative 4 and 6. So if you got those answers, good job. All right, so that was the lesson on negative numbers. We're going to do a lot more with negative numbers later on in this course. And for your entire math education, you're going to be using negative numbers constantly. Here's all the work that we did today. If you'd like to take screenshots of these pages to help you with your homework or to study for tests, go ahead and do that now. Here's your homework. Go ahead and get screenshots of the first 2 pages and the 3rd and 4th pages. As you can see, you have the answers here. Be sure to write equal signs on each problem. So for example, over this you write an equal sign, then write your answers. So be sure to write those equal signs. And as usual, you want to write a title for your paper, and you need to write your name, the date, and the course title. And you need to number all the problems and do everything that we do in our math courses. And I just want you to be aware that homework is not optional. If you don't do the homework, you'll learn absolutely nothing in this class or in this course in general. So that was the class today, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next class.